Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Coming at you today for an outro. We haven't recorded in a minute because we've been sick. So
Well, you're
you're about to get sick,
yeah,
probably.
Probably gonna get me sick.
We've got a sick baby. So, anyways, we're listening. We are answering listener questions in this episode. You can check down on the show notes below for the timestamps if you want to skip ahead to those. But in the meantime, we're going to be talking about a little bit of stuff that we've had going on, and as well as our past guests. So, Jacob, how you doing?
Oh, doing well. Andrew, how you doing, Mister Sick as Dog?
Man, I'm not. I'm doing all right. So there's a thing that happened. I told you about this earlier. We went and put some cameras on some scrapes in the area. Okay. We got a couple of Tacticams, a couple other cell cameras, and we went and put them on some scrapes that we knew were going to produce in this one area. And man, sure enough, like clockwork, they kind of started popping off right when they're supposed to. And I'm kind of in a dilemma right now with work and vacation time and stuff, because we got this one hunt coming up that I ain't going to miss, and so I'm using pretty much the last of my vacation time on that. And I was like, man, if I had like one more day, I would take tomorrow off. This is me thinking yesterday.
Yep.
I would take tomorrow off and go hunt that area, because I think those scrapes are like really popping off. Because over the last couple of days, there's been some like bucks coming by the scrapes, nothing crazy, but there's been does working the scrapes, which we have a listener question today about does working scrapes.
Ooh.
And there's been some does working scrapes, and when that starts happening, bro. When you're on a community scrape and you get some does coming by, pawing it and everything, it's about to go down. And sure enough, this morning at like 6:30, nice buck shows up. Absolute shooter shows up.
And that was right after some does came through.
Yeah, he was like 5 minutes behind a doe group that came through. One of the does in the group worked a scrape. I haven't gotten the video from that one yet, but I'm gonna go get it, request that video and see like how she was acting, because I'm curious. But yeah, he came through 5 minutes after her, and then there's another scrape on the next ridge over. It's only a couple hundred yards away. Actually, some of the deer, we'll get them on one of these scrapes, and like they're all about 12 minutes later, they'll be at the next scrape if they're traveling like kind of that line. Even the coyotes too. We got a coyote on one camera, and it was on the next camera 12 minutes later. So that other camera a couple hundred yards away this afternoon, 4 o'clock, over an hour before dark, another shooter came walking into that one, and I was like, "God, man!" I was at work, incredibly distracting when you're trying to work and you're freaking your thing.
It's even more distracting when you're sitting on another community scrape, not seeing anything, and then you look at your phone, notification comes up, and there's a shooter on camera. I'm like, "Are you kidding me?"
Not even hunting the right property.
No, not at all. But no, it's interesting because like. It's been, I think when we put those cameras out, it's been a couple weeks now. But I think in the first 72 hours or so, we had like 6 or 7 different bucks show up.
Yeah.
None of them being shooters, but just a bunch of different age class. Like probably the oldest buck, there might have been like 1 3.5-year-old.
Yeah.
And they're all just kind of like all over the cameras, but there wasn't really much doe activity. And then every time you would have, probably 5 or 6 days into having those cameras out there, 1 or 2 little doe groups came by, worked the scrapes, and there's like a flurry activity.
Yep.
Then it kind of died off for a day or two. And then again, doe group comes by, both these cameras, and it's like bang, 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 buck, buck, buck.
Yep.
And it's like, ooh, okay.
It's on.
Yeah. Well, it's getting good.
Yeah, it's definitely getting good. So yeah, we're gonna have a listener Q&A about that.
It's so funny. It's so funny because you see this on social media right now. This is a big benefit of living in the South, especially one of these states that does have a little bit later rut times than a typical November rut. You saw these guys from the Midwest like, man, my season's coming to close, all this kind of stuff.
We're starting to get YouTube comments. People are like, are they just now rutting where y'all are at?
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, where you been, man?
Yeah. And I'm like, it's so funny because, they talk about their seasons like coming to a close. In some of these states, like the season is going to end at the end of December. And I'm like, dude, it's just now getting good for a decent part of Alabama, a decent portion, and then it'll keep getting good in other parts of the state, as you get into late December, going into January, and even into mid to late January.
Yeah. I was telling someone the other day about that because someone was asking about this area. I put some stuff on my Instagram story about it, and somebody messaged me, and they were like, hey, are you just now rutting? I was like, yeah. And in this area, is going to be good. We're going to hunt this till like right around Christmas, and then we're bouncing to a new area. And what we're doing is we're kind of catching early rut to, I guess, what would be considered kind of like mid rut for like kind of peak rut
Yeah.
/ lockdown. And when that happens, we're bouncing to another area and we're catching that early rut. We're just catching that early rut. And if you were to put it in Midwest terms, what would you say? You're hunting like
Late October.
like
1st.
October 25th to like November 4th or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
like,
something like that.
If you're looking at like a, typical Midwestern rut where your peak rut's like November 12th or whatever.
Yep.
So that's because we've had a lot of success, especially on scrapes, man, because I'm a scrape guy. I love scrapes, especially these last couple of years. I've always liked scrapes. I like the idea of like trying to figure out scrapes, but it's really only been these last probably 3 or 4 years that I feel like I'm actually honing in and figuring something out that is now consistently been working for me for several years in a row. So I'm like, all right, this is a thing. I think I know what to do with these.
Yeah. And the cool thing with scrapes is like, I think it was Tyrell Roy, who we interviewed from Oklahoma, and he talked about like using scrapes as a funnel.
Yeah.
And even in like more open woods, is like that scrape is like a natural funnel where like if deer are like meandering through a property, but there's like one really good primary or community scrape, not like one of your little basketball size scrapes, but like a scrape bigger than this table or as big as this table. It's got a bunch of licking branches, a bunch of activity from both bucks and does. That like naturally like pinches deer down where they might not go work the scrape, but they're going to kind of get in the general area of that scrape.
Yeah, they're going to get close to it.
And it's exactly what we've seen, especially last year, but even going into this year, it's like, you see all this activity in and around the scrape. So like you don't have to be sitting on top of the scrape, but if you can be in the vicinity of that scrape, even within like 100 yards of that scrape, there's a good chance you're going to catch a buck, especially coming downwind of it.
Yeah.
Doesn't even walk to the scrape. You don't even have him on camera, but you shoot a buck that you've never had on camera, but he's been checking that scrape for a month and a half now.
Yeah, definitely. And that goes back to what I was saying a couple weeks ago about scrapes is like it's more of like a focal point in some of these areas. And in one of the spots that one of those shooters showed up this morning is where I killed a buck last year.
Yep.
And that's how it set up. I was sitting about 50 yards from that scrape, and I shot the deer about 50 yards from me. He was probably about 80-ish yards or so from that scrape total. And he was swinging around it. That's what he did. He actually swung around that scrape, and I was able to shoot him. And it goes to show that, and Shane Parker's talking about this, when you have your camera right there on that scrape, like, dude, you have no idea how many bucks are walking past that thing that you're not getting on camera.
Yep.
Like, and I don't want to throw a percentage on it because I've never, like, tried to, like put a bunch of cameras around a scrape, like in all directions and try to figure out, like, how many deer are skirting it. But if you talk to guys like Shane or Paul Putero talk about the same thing, it's a pretty high percentage of bucks that are probably coming and looking at that. They're either visually checking it or winding that scrape, but coming close to that scrape is like a way higher percentage than deer that are actually hitting the scrape.
Yep.
Right. So like that's one thing that gives me hope about that spot. And actually Shane made a post about it this morning because he's hunting another part of the state. Similar situation. He had some does on camera, and this doe was like working the licking branch, doing the whole thing with the scrape, and he said, Shane, he'll put cameras all around a scrape like that. He'll put like 5 cameras right there in one little area, and he's putting one camera on the scrape, and he's putting other cameras basically to catch deer going around that scrape. So he'll put one on the trail 50 yards away, and he'll put one here and there. And what he was saying is like, I got these does working the scrape right now, and I already know that when I go in there and check those other cameras, I'm going to have a nice surprise.
Yeah.
There's going to be something good on those other cameras because, when does are working those scrapes, man, it's time. It's happening.
Yeah. No, it's that's the cool thing about a scrape. That's where like, when people write in asking like, if you could only put a camera on one thing, like if you could only scout for one day and find something to put a camera on, in my opinion, it would try to find a primary community scrape. Like I just think you get such good inventory, and you're not just getting inventory of bucks, but you're also getting inventory of when does are coming through. And that's been interesting for us is like not only how many does are coming through at a time, like these little doe groups, like they're not big. I think the biggest group we've had is maybe 4, something like that.
Yeah.
But you're seeing, is there a pattern to when these does are coming through? Like, is it an everyday thing? Is it every few days? Any specific conditions? But the funny thing is, I know with the scrape that's on the pine tree, okay, that scrape, doe's bed above that on the main ridge system.
Okay.
Because that and above it's the saddle that I shot my buck on last year. We also, when we went in there and dropped these cameras off, before we ever made it down there, we did a huge loop going through this area.
Yep.
And we jumped some does right above that camera, bedded on the side of that ridge.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that I find really interesting, because it's a spot, specifically that one scrape. It's in a low spot off a main ridge system. The ridge is fairly thick cover, relatively thicker than everything else around there. And the does are definitely bedding up on top of that.
Yep.
And the bucks, during certain times of day, like early morning before thermals start rising, and in the afternoon when the thermals start falling, because the thermals probably fall in this area fairly early because the ridge, how big that ridge is.
Yeah.
These bucks can stay low and work this area and kind of scent check all that doe bedding from being down low. They don't have to go up top if they don't want to. And
Yeah.
we saw that last year when I shot that buck and we were over there working that buck. Another shooter was on camera in that same scrape 300 yards below us while we're working on that deer.
Yeah.
And it's like, they can move through these areas without you even like realizing they're there. So it's just really interesting kind of seeing how everything's popping off. But I will say this. I'm still waiting for one of these really big bucks we had on camera last year to show up.
Megas.
There was an 8-point last year that, God,
He was a big deer.
yeah, I do
Legit big deer.
I would do a lot for that deer, man.
Yeah.
And he hasn't showed up quite yet, so I don't know if he got killed or died. Coyotes got a hold of him.
Yeah, that I was wondering. Well, we got these cameras out about 2 weeks later than I got them out last year. So I think because actually that particular deer, we actually had him on camera more towards like late November, early December. And then he kind of disappeared, and then he started showing back up chasing does. So when we got him on that camera, he's actually like running a doe. And you could just tell it was him because like the doe ran by, and that triggered the camera. And then he came running by, and he's like 30 yards, in the background. But, man, you can just tell because he just had a freaking huge frame. Like, what deer it is.
Yeah.
And another thing, too, this is something also that, I mentioned in that from last year. These we had cameras on these exact same scrapes last year, same exact spots. There's 2 in particular we had them on. We got a lot more cameras out there this year in different areas, but these 2 particular scrapes, we had cameras out there last year. We went and put cameras back on them this year, and to a T, everything is happening the same way.
Yeah,
does are showing up. Like small bucks show up at certain times, big bucks start showing up. A lot of does start showing up. I mean, almost to the day.
Yeah. And
that goes into annual patterns. These are cell cameras, and primarily one of the reasons we're using cell cameras here is because it's really hard to get to where these scrapes are at. It's a really difficult walk, but also it's a really invasive walk.
It's very invasive. I was going to say it's almost more invasive than just the distance. Like, because you have to get down in amongst where all these deer are at throughout the day. So it's not like you can just go check this scrape at 12 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Because if you do it, more than likely you're going to be bumping deer all around that scrape that are bedded.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's where I feel like the cell camera really comes into advantage, because you can put these cameras in areas that's going to be highly invasive if you go back and check it, but you can still go and hunt it. It's just you have to time it perfectly to get in there. You're still probably going to bump some deer, but you just got to realize if you're going in there, you're staying there. Like, you're not hunting there for 3 hours and then bouncing.
Yeah, and it's a spot I'd prefer to not. And this is like when cell cameras first came on the scene. That's what I was excited about with them. I'm like, man,
except for the $550 price tag.
Yeah, well, I didn't buy one for a couple years, but I remember when they first came out and they were like $500. I was like, man, I can't wait for these to be like super cheap in 5 years, and I'll be danged. Here we are. But anyways, that's one of the things I was initially excited about. Is like, man, you're gonna be able to put these in invasive spots, and you're not going to have to go in and check that camera, which you could do before. Obviously, you could just leave cameras and let them soak, which we still do. But if you want to get that intel faster, and it's an area you're actively hunting, it's nice to have that for sure.
Yeah.
And we got other cameras that are not cellular on other scrapes in this area that I'm just going to leave them, and if I happen to hunt next to them, I'll go in there and check it. If not, I'm going to get them probably in February or March.
Yeah.
And I say all that to say, if you don't have cell cameras, then I would just put normal trail cameras on scrapes like this, which I'll link some YouTube videos in the description of this podcast that you can go and watch about basically finding these community scrapes. and they'll be super helpful. And because these are like the absolute key, at least for me this time of year, they're the absolute key for finding big deer. And a lot of people we interview. I mean, I picked this up from people we interview. So you can go put your regular cameras on those. Let them soak, hunt the area, like do whatever, but just let them do their thing. Let them take pictures. Don't move them. Leave them there. And next year, you can bet that about the same time they're gonna be doing the same stuff. It doesn't matter what the moon phase is. It doesn't matter if it's hot. It does not matter. They will be doing the same thing next year. Like the rut ain't gonna move a month because the moon was wrong or anything.
I can hear Michael Pike texting us
I
right
know,
now.
I know. Look, I got friends that they're all into the moon thing, but I'm just saying, like every year it's the same, dude. And it really, for me, there's one place that I've been hunting ever since I was a little kid, and every single year, man, people are like, oh, the rut's different. Oh, it's this time, and like I've been hunting it for like 20 years now. Like ever since I was a kid, I'm like, no, dude, the rut does not move. It doesn't. They're moving in an area where you're not seeing them.
Yeah.
Or movement might be a little suppressed from the heat or whatever. But those does are still in estrus. Like they're still having a little deer party down in the thicket somewhere, or down in the shady spot, or they're just not where you're seeing them. But all that to say is like take advantage of those annual patterns, and make an investment right now. Even if you're hunting late season in your post rut, make an investment right now. Get your cameras out in good spots. Let them sit. And then, take all that data and look at it after the season and use it next year.
Speak about that. Also, you got to remember to go get your cameras after the season, because I went hunting in a spot, a little update. I went hunting in a spot I haven't really been in since 2020, and happened to go find one of my cameras. I was still in the spot.
I told you had a camera.
Yeah, and I was like, nah, I got that camera. No, it was still sitting on the tree. That sucker's waterlogged. Little cheap wild game innovation. And I don't know if I pulled the SD card on it or if someone else might have pulled. There was an SD card in it, so I don't know if someone took the SD card.
I don't know who'd be freaking walking around in that thicket.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe a rabbit hunter.
Maybe, but like the funny, so that man, the problem is I still left that camera there. I didn't take it off the tree.
Why?
I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
It's a memorable spot. No, I'll have to go get it at some point. I just gotta go throw it away. I mean, it's completely like there's water. Like you open it up and like you look at the little screen. There's like water all in the screen and everything like that.
Gosh.
Which is not. It doesn't flood. It's just. I mean, after getting rained on for 3 years, it finally gave out. But the funny thing is, I walked into that spot because I was gonna go hunt. It's pine thicket and there's a little SMZ back in there, and I was like, I'm gonna go sit in that SMZ for one afternoon hunt. I had some free time. And I walked in and noticed the camera was there. I'm like, son of a gun. And first off, I had like little bungee cords on it. Mm-hmm. That pine tree, it ain't grown around the bungee cord, but it's snug enough you're going to have to cut them off.
Oh, nice.
But right in front of it, there was a scrape right in front of that camera. Right in front of the camera.
Really?
And I'm like, dang, dude.
Was there a scrape there when you...
No.
Really?
Uh-uh.
Oh, man.
But there was always a big trail. So there's a big trail that always, where that camera was at in this pine thicket, there was always a big trail that kind of came around the head of this SMZ. And again, stream side management zone, hardwood drainage. And that's what that camera was looking over. And it just, that trail's beat down right now. There's rubs going down. There's a scrape right in front of the camera. Yeah, and, anyways, it made me think, like, man, I just need to sit right here in this pine thicket, sit on the ground and be able to shoot 25 yards. That's about it. But yeah, so long story short, if you do these long-term camera placements, make sure you organize it extremely well in your OnX, okay?
Yeah.
With a ton of notes, especially like if you go and check it, but you leave the camera there and like you're going to come back and check it again, like maybe swap SD cards out, swap batteries out, just make sure you put that in your OnX so you know about it, because I still had this camera pin there, but I didn't have any notes in it on the pin specifically of, did I grab the camera or did I not grab the camera? So, because you don't want to be, you don't want turkey season to come around and be like, did I get all my cameras? And you start counting, you're like,
I think I'm missing a camera.
Did I have 10 cameras or did I have 12 cameras? How many cameras did I have? And like you try to go back and think about it, like, I don't really know. So you just don't want to have that happen. So make sure you stay extremely organized just with your notes so you know where all these cameras are at. Because, again, that's what Michael Perry does. Michael Perry is one of the first guys we had interviewed who talked about doing these long camera placements where he would leave them out for, a whole season. He'd put some fresh batteries in them, put them in areas, and a lot of times it's an area, maybe some of them are more high traffic than others, but maybe they only, like certain spots, certain funnels only get high traffic for like 2 weeks out of the year.
Yes.
But that's when he's trying to get the most intel. And then also see if there's any deer come through late season, all that kind of stuff. And then he uses that information specifically to focus on areas to hunt next year. But the thing is, I need to talk to Perry about this. I don't know how much he actually puts them on scrapes like that. Most of the time, he just puts them on like specific travel corridor funnels.
Yeah, I don't think he does scrapes.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's how that's helped him kill his big buck, that his state record deer. He had that deer on camera for several years, and he knew that it liked to use that travel corridor around that time
during a certain time of the year.
Yeah, and that's where that annual pattern thing comes in. It's like, it's not like if you got him on camera coming through here at 8 a.m. on December 4th this year that he's going to do that on December 4th at 8 a.m. next year. But within 2 or 3 days, there's actually a pretty good chance he's going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Especially if weather conditions are similar.
Yeah.
So it's about being able to put yourself in a similar situation.
But that goes back to I think the advantage. Like, I think there's a very specific advantage on like focus on travel corridors for camera placements, like especially in really tight funnels. Kind of like what Michael Perry does. But there's also an advantage of doing the same thing on primary scrapes or community scrapes.
Yeah.
And try and get the intel specifically. I'd almost want more intel, not necessarily when bucks are checking it, but when does start using it. And now we've got 2 years of history on 2 specific primary community scrapes that does are using during certain like days and weeks of a year.
Yep.
And to me, after we now have 2 years of data with that, and we'll leave these cameras out there for a little bit longer so we can kind of get some more intel. Next year, it's like, put the cameras out, but I know on this, and this day when these does have typically
100%.
used a scrape, I'm sitting in that spot.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, get that pattern 2 years in a row, and then you can maybe start moving your cameras around. And one reason that spot's so good is, like you mentioned, it's like it's not quite a bench, but it's kind of like a bench basically. Like if you think of a big old ridge going up, it goes up, and right there at that bottom third, it levels out like a bench seat,
Yep.
And then it gets steep again and keeps going up. Well, the steep part, that upper 2/3 of the ridge is like it's kind of thick. It's like vines and saplings and stuff.
Yeah.
You can still hunt it. It's not that thick. It's not really thick compared to what we normally hunt.
Early season, if you went during bow season, God bless you.
Yeah, it's pretty thick.
But during gun season,
it's not bad. But they're using that.
Yeah.
So there's trails in it. I walked all through it last year. There's big old fat trails in it. I'm sure they bed in it. But also, when that bench drops off and that lowest 1/3, the front face of that ridge is really glady.
Yep.
Like it's sage grass, sparkleberry, little scrubby pine trees. It's rocky, and a glade is like it's like shallow soil, rocky, and you're gonna have like sage grass and stuff growing in it, and it makes really good bedding. It's really, really good habitat, and they bed in that. And almost all the bucks on the scrapes that the buck was at this morning come from that glade. Almost all of them. Or they either come from the glade, like they came out of it, or they're swinging around the ridge.
Is that where that buck this afternoon came from?
Yes. He came from that. The buck I killed came from that. The big 8-point last year came from that. Almost every single buck that has been on that camera so far, almost every deer that has been on that camera has come from that. Like when you're looking at where the camera's at, and they're like coming in from the right-hand side, they're coming from that glade. And so that's holding deer. And so it's just like a perfect little travel corridor between that glade and that other cover higher up on the ridge. And there's actually a really good example of that in one of the YouTube videos I'm going to link below. It's not the exact spot, but it sets up exactly like how this spot sets up. So it's like a perfect example of what we're talking about here, about how the terrain sets up. And that scrape is just right there in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Right there between those two things. It just makes so much sense. So I'm really excited to get in there and hunt, because you never know. Again, the buck you killed in there last year, we never had on camera at all. And another kind of cool thing is, so we put some more cameras out all over the place, and we got cameras, spanning several miles on these ridge systems. And we got this one buck. He's a big 7-point. And he's like a big wide 7-point. He's skinny. He's not like a world beater or anything like that. He's a good deer, But he's like a real wide 7-point basically. And we had a buck in there last year that kind of looked like that, really wide.
Yeah.
And at first I was like, oh, that's that same deer. But when I went and looked at it,
Yeah.
the one from last year had mass.
Yeah.
And his antlers like swooped down in the front a
Yeah,
little bit.
he looked.
He was a freak.
Yeah,
he's a crazy looking deer.
Yeah.
But so no, not the same deer. But anyways, that particular buck, we've had him on 3 different cameras now. Just freaking walking all over the place.
I mean, spanning it probably 3 miles.
Span as a crow flies between the 2 furthest cameras is 1.5 miles.
Okay.
But actually walking how you have to walk through there,
Uh-huh.
I mean, yeah, it's like 3 miles probably.
Mhm.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
I'm like, he's gonna get killed walking around like that. He's gonna get killed by me because I'm shooting that deer if I see him. I'd shoot him in a heartbeat, son. And Jacob would shoot him too. He won't tell you that, but
No.
he will 100%
No,
shoot
when
that
that
deer.
deer walks by me, I'm going to shoot him with the phone and the camera and
No.
just like text it to Andrew. Like, here you go, he's coming to you.
No, absolutely not.
I'm catching and releasing with him.
That if people remember the Arkansas podcast, this is why you can't trust Jacob with trail camera videos and judging deer off trail camera. Anthony's buck, the reason that we didn't think we had it on camera is because they did get it on camera in October, and Jacob was like, "Yeah, it's a pretty good deer." Just kept scrolling. He's like, "Yeah, I mean, it's a good buck, but he's nothing crazy." And then Anthony kills it. And we're all like, "Oh my gosh, look at this thing, dude!" You can go see that buck on the Arkansas podcast video. So perfect example of why you can't trust Jacob on trail camera pictures at all.
Trying to look for a jaw dropper, which Anthony's, was,
That
but
was a jaw dropper.
he didn't look that impressive on camera.
Oh, whatever. So yeah, we got 9 cameras out there now, and this is an area
Is that
where
it?
yeah, I think so. Because I put out 5 the other day, and we put out 4 when me and you scouted.
Okay.
So I went back in and put out 5 more in a new area that we haven't really been into, but it kind of connects to where we've been hunting. Not trying to give away too many details, but we know some people who have some private land adjacent to this area, and that private land has gotten some whoppers on camera.
Mega giants. I mean, like deer, like
150 class deer, legit.
I think he's got a couple bigger than that.
I mean,
there was one specifically day one in Iowa. Trigger or bows being released, no doubt. So, but yeah, I mean,
so we know that they're there.
Yeah,
haven't got them on camera yet. And when I went and put those 5 cameras out, 2 of them are in spots that are a little bit off the beaten path.
Yep.
3 of them are on scrapes, but 2 of them are on. Actually, so this one sets up kind of in a cool way. So there's these 2 steep faces, and again, we're mountain hunting here, so we're kind of bouncing around. And if you listen in a month, we're gonna be hunting swamps. So it's the beauty of Alabama.
Oh God, yeah.
So we're switching it up. So
we're switching it from the timber rattlesnakes to the water moccasins.
That's right.
The alligators.
So we're hunting like big ridge systems right now, and there's 2 steep faces on this one ridge system that I was interested in, and on those 2 steep faces, there's 2 mountain laurel thickets. And in between those 2 mountain laurel thickets is like a little drainage that kind of cuts in between them, and the mountain laurel stops at that drainage. So the drainage is open going between them. And I could tell all this on the map, like looking at Onyx. You can obviously see where the steep stuff is with the slope angle shading, but also on the imagery, you can tell where that mountain laurel is because there's like a green hue to the timber. And so I was like, that's going to be a good spot because it's basically a freaking lane going through this mountain laurel thicket.
Yeah.
So I was really interested in getting up to that. And right where that empties down, there's like a little finger ridge that it kind of empties down into. And I get up to that finger ridge, and as soon as I get up there, there's like 15, 20 rubs, like fresh rubs. Some of them are fresh. Some of them are historical rubs. There was one about as big as this Nalgene that had been rubbed in years past and was just shredded this year too. Fresh too. And mountain laurel twisted up and broken from rubs, and there was a scrape there. And interestingly, the scrape was like 50 yards further down that secondary ridge point from all those rubs. The rubs are kind of going down the edge of the mountain laurel, but the scrape was like 50 yards off the edge of that. So the scrape's like out in the open, like off that edge. So I put a camera on that scrape, but I also put a camera on that mountain laurel edge where all those rubs are at. Because just looking at the buck sign, I'm like, obviously there's a buck swinging around the scrape. And one thing that we did like that big series with Shane Parker and Paul Putera last year, they were talking about a lot of bucks will purposefully walk through areas where they can visually check a scrape. Maybe not smell it or anything, but they want to look down there and see it. and this sets up exactly like that. So I put a camera on that, and I think I'm like the most excited to check that camera because I'm like, what is swinging around this scrape? And the way it sets up, I mean, obviously it doesn't have to walk in front of my camera, but it is greatly encouraged to walk in front of my camera. So I think I'm gonna get I think I'm gonna get bucks on that camera that do not show up on any other camera. So I'm really excited about
which
that.
camera
One.
did you put on that?
A Browning.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So I put it on video mode and everything, and it's on a perfect little open travel corridor. So it's it should get some stuff on it. I'm really excited about that. But I put a couple more out on scrapes in this area, so we're gonna see what shows up. And again, I'm gonna be very interested to see what bucks show up on these scrapes versus the ones that we have on a different part of the ridge system, because man, between those two areas is pretty far. But I actually would not be surprised if we got some of the same deer, because I think they cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Like miles and miles at a time. So
Yeah. You look at the bodies on these deer, you kind of see why. Like, you know, we got 2, 3, probably 3 mature bucks on camera, and they've got, you know, big front, you know, big barreled chest and everything, but they're just like, dude, they're lean.
they're
like,
long and lean, dude.
None of those deer, like even like that one that came in this afternoon, which is probably one of the bigger body bucks. He probably doesn't weigh 165 pounds, maybe.
They're like a bunch of cross country runners, man.
Yeah, but it's like, dude, if you were 230 pounds having to carry your, you know, your big butt up and down all that crap,
Yeah.
God bless you, dude. And then side hill and everything else. And that's one thing that's kind of interesting. I know people kill some like fairly big body bucks in like different parts, like mountain systems and everything. But it's like, it always seems like when you go in those areas, it's like, you know, they can still have very impressive antlers, but it's like the bodies, they just go through so much more use in that.
Yeah.
That's just, you know, it doesn't make sense. I think, not even genetically, but it doesn't make sense for a 230-pound buck to be running around in a whole bunch of like gnarly stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting how far they move, because like in this area, like the ridge tops aren't that bad. They kind of like plateau out a little bit, and it's kind of flat up there.
And it kind of rolled over.
But when they dump off that plateau and they got to go to the next one, they got to go way down and way back up.
Yep.
But you know, yeah, you're probably right. That's why. Which, by the way, we got some good comments on your thing about. I wonder if like those really thick pine plantation areas that we hunt tend to have like narrow, tall racks. You wonder if that's like a genetic thing where they're adapted, because like if you got freaking a 22-inch wide rack, it's gonna be really hard to go busting through a pine thicket.
Yeah.
And we got some good comments on that.
Oh, did we really?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So we need to ask some biologists about that. That'd be very, very interesting to talk about that. But anyways, it's kind of funny that now we're hunting like a big wood setting, and now we're getting like these wider bucks on camera, like wider than the bucks we typically get in like a pine country setting.
Yeah, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's like, well, it was kind of funny because our buddy JT just killed big 9-point in more pine country. And he's, I don't know, I wish, I need to keep a tape measure in the truck. I don't have one. I wish I would have measured his inside spread, but for the area.
If he's like right at the edge of the ears, they're about 16 inches. Isn't that right?
Yeah, and he's probably at least 2 inches outside the ears, if not maybe more than that. But for that area, he's a wide deer. Like, you know, other than, you know, one of our other buddies, Zach, who's killed a real wide buck out there, and a couple other guys. Typically, it's like kind of on like, you know, those tighter frames, like 15-inch wide, you know, bucks, good main beam length that kind of swoop out with tall tines. But I saw when he killed that, and he sent me the photo. I went to help him get it out. I was like, dude, that is like an anomaly. Like, you know, you every now and then a deer like that will kind of pop up, but it's like that's not like the common, you know, mature buck for, you know, some of those areas. So it is very, very interesting kind of seeing the difference in just like antler makeup and, you know, frame size, like width, and then, you know, height, frame height, and everything else. It's like, yeah, fascinating.
Yeah. I think that was another day, like y'all were all hunting that day. I was going to go hunting. I wasn't going to hunt the same property as y'all, but I was going to go hunting that day, but I had to freaking work on Sunday, actually. That was a bummer, because I think our cameras lit up that day too. I'm like, golly.
Yeah, no, they did. Yeah, that's the day I found the camera, trail camera.
Yep.
But I had actually, so that's another thing I was gonna bring up. So I decided to expand further into this area. Was it? Maybe it was the same day. Let me think here. It was the same day. It was, no, it wasn't the day I found the camera. It was the next day. The day I found the camera was the day before that. But the day JT killed his buck, I had like an hour and a half to burn, maybe 2 hours before I had to go to a Christmas party. So I'm like, I don't have a lot of time. I can't really. I mean, I could hunt, but like, I'm just gonna go for a walk with with a gun. And I did a loop, went through that pine thicket, and I did a big loop going through there. And I was trying to see, like, this is an area I found a big primary scrape on a water oak sapling that was kind of like in the pine thicket. I'm like, I'm gonna go check that out. Second I got into that pine thicket, it was like instantly scrapes, just like paralleling inside the pine thicket. Worked the tree, and there was some that were fresh because it had just rained like super hard, like all that previous night and going into that morning. JT killed his buck right after the rain stopped.
Yep.
And there were scrapes that were just wide open, like just worked. And I'm like, and I had my, I had actually, no, I forgot my grunt call. That's what it was. Yeah, I forgot my grunt call. And I was like, dang it. I'm like, man, I could probably like, make some racket in here with this high wind and maybe try to call them back. But did a little loop through these pines, and you can kind of walk underneath them. You're kind of ducking, dodging some stuff every now and then. But that primary scrape where I talked about this on the podcast a couple of years ago, it was back in 2021 maybe. I had walked up, and that's when I found this scrape. And when I went to the scrape, I had messed around with that water oak sapling. I was trying to break, branches down to give them some more licking branches. And I had a buck charge me, or like come running in, kind of investigating what was going on.
Yeah.
And I had the bow with me, and just there was no opportunity to take a shot before he busted me at like 15 yards or something. But I went back in there, and the bucks had broken off that limb, and there's not another limb hanging down, so they stopped using it.
Oh, what, really?
Like the limb that was hanging down, the big limb they were hanging down, it was broken, laying on the ground. Scrape. You can't tell there was ever a scrape there at that point, but there's no other licking branches. So it made me think, and I should have done this while I was there. I should have freaking, worked on a couple branches, give them a couple options real quick, and open it back up.
Yeah, dude. That actually makes me wonder about areas like that, like where Greg Skufka was talking about giving them licking branch, like putting a licking branch in a spot, which you could do with an actual branch, but some people do it with like a hemp rope and hang it off a tree. And the only reason I haven't tried that yet is because I cannot think of a better way to alert everybody to a spot. Like nothing sticks out like a big old freaking fat hemp rope hanging off a tree in the woods.
Yeah.
So there's only very certain areas where I would do that, where I would be really confident no one would find it. But I've heard that works really, really well. And then go around and cut down all the licking branches everywhere else except for that spot and make them use that scrape.
Yeah.
Which I'm actually trying at my hunting club right now because apparently the deer out there are like asexual or something, and they're not. Dude, they're just not laying down sign. I can't find a scrape to save my life. And so that's what I did. I went down a logging road that me and you found in turkey season that had 2 scrapes on it.
Yep.
And those scrapes, I couldn't even find them. Like, they're completely covered with pine straw. I couldn't even remember where they were. So I was like, whatever, I'm just going to make my own scrape. And so I just cleared out this spot. There was like a little oak scrub oak on the edge of the road that had limbs, but there was like stuff all in it hanging down to the ground. So I cleaned it up, made all these licking branches just the perfect height, and then I walked 50 yards in either direction, cut every single limb on both sides of the road. So I was like, all right, y'all are using this scrape. And I put a camera on it, so we'll see what happens.
Well, going back to this spot, though, after I did this little loop through this pine thicket, and I found a couple other scrapes in it, but it was nothing, nothing that really blew my mind. I was like, I'm going to pop on this next little SMZ, which is an area that is the first place I had ever hunted on this piece of public back in like 2013, 2014.
Is that the same SMZ you found that deadhead in?
No, one over from that one.
Gotcha.
That's the one I actually hunted in there, right next to where I found the deadhead. No sign at all in the SMZ.
Really?
Like, you found some tracks, but no scrapes, no rubs, nothing in that SMZ, which kind of blew my mind. I go to the next one, not the case.
Okay.
So I go to the next one. After I loop through the pines, drop down, and start kind of side hill. I start seeing some rubs, but nothing like older rubs maybe from a month ago. And I jump a doe up that was bedded right at the top of the SMZ, and it's kind of rocky in there. She jumps up, kind of bounds off, and it's real high winds when I go in there. I keep working up the SMZ, and that SMZ, it's like real steep, and it kind of tapers out and kind of rolls out where it's a little more gentle, that top half of it. And I start working up in there, and I come up, I could see this looking branch from 50 yards away.
Oh.
And I'm like, oh, this is going to be a good one. So, actually, before that, I saw another scrape that was right there underneath a little beech tree, and I was like, okay, that's cool, but nothing crazy. Then this other one, I could see the licking branch from, again, probably close to 50 yards away. You can see it hanging down. It's all gnarled up. No leaves on that whole branch.
Dude, I get chills when I think about that.
And I walk up to it, and I'm like, yep, Andrew, get excited about this
one.
And
my gosh.
And it's right at the spot. So if you look at it, you can't really – you kind of can notice it on the map, but really got to be there when that bottom, it's like real steep on both sides, like real rocky and steep. And the second, and that first scrape I'd found was like right on the edge of that stuff. But the bigger scrape was right when it gets more gentle, where the deer are crossing at. That's where that scrape was placed at, right in that SMZ. And it's like pines on both sides of you, thick pines on both sides of you. And it looked incredible. Like, and I was like, man, and it had just been worked that morning. And I was like, and it did, about the size of this table, but like the licking branch is what was impressive, because you can tell they've used this tree for multiple years.
Yeah.
It's how twisted and gnarled and just jacked up it was. But anyways, I kind of swung out there and kind of hiked back up to the truck. Had to slip through those pines and everything, and found some more good sign in the pines. But it was like that SMZ just sets up so good to catch that movement going across from one pine thicket to the next pine thicket. Just because it's not like a lot of SMZs. A lot of times they'll unless it's like going up into a clear cut where like the head of the SMZ typically isn't going to be as steep as the bottom of it.
Yeah.
Like at the very bottom towards the creek side. This one is kind of like that, but it's just so steep for the first half of the SMZ as it goes up. The deer just aren't crossing. Like there's no tracks, no trails. They're side hill, but they're not really crossing. The second it rolls out to like being more gentle, that's where they're at. And that's an area like, dude, I feel very confident going in there, even like just bow hunting and catching deer slipping across in that one spot. And like, especially going in there like a light and variable day where you just have like that falling thermal in the afternoon. I think it'd be killer. But yeah, that was pretty interesting, just kind of seeing that, and just like the amount of scrapes we found. Like when where JT shot his buck at, I had been in there. He hunted it maybe a week ago, and I went a couple days later. I was like, hey, because he told me, he's like, dude, if you want to go in there and hunt it, you can. But I'm like, hey, I hunted another spot in the general area. I'm like, hey, I'm gonna go over here and scout it. So I walked in and kind of walked the little logging road that he's had seen some sign on, and he talked about like he'd hunted off this little logging road, and the day he went in, there was like 2 scrapes on that logging road, like in a little low spot. And then when he walked out from that morning, there was like 3 brand new scrapes there.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, so there was like 5 scrapes. I go in there and there's like 18 scrapes.
Oh, God.
Or 20 scrapes, 25. It was every limb that was hanging in that logging road would have had a scrape underneath, like really, really nice scrapes. And it did a loop through there, found some big rubs, and then I swung around to a different little pine thicket that I haven't been in years, dude. I mean, probably 5 years. And probably almost 4 years ago, I think it was 2019, you and me hunted over there when it rained, downpoured. I was actually deer hunting in waders and a rain jacket. It was raining that hard.
Yeah, that was 2019. That was right before I got married and I broke my toe trying to rattle in a buck.
Yeah. So I swung through an area right there. We have 2 different aged pines that come together. And when I got into that spot, there was a couple scrapes right there, but nothing overly impressive. And then all of a sudden I get to this area, and it is seriously 35 to 40 yards long and probably 25 yards wide, or the ground just looks destroyed. It looked like hogs came through. Best way to describe it. And but I don't think there's no pigs over in this area. So I'm like, what's going on here? And I look down, and all of a sudden I just start seeing like tufts of deer hair, and then I see like a giant buck track, and then I look over to the left, and I see a pine tree the size of like maybe 1.5 inches in diameter, almost 2 inches diameter, that is that's green, laid over on the ground. I'm like, what the heck did that? I walk up to it, and in the bark of that little pine tree, again, 8 foot tall, 9 foot tall tree that's only about 1.5 inches wide, 2 inches wide, there's deer hair embedded into the actual bark. And
Somebody got their butt whooped.
And I kept looking, and there's like clumps of deer hair laying everywhere with just the ground's torp and big buck tracks. Then I started looking at some of these bigger pine trees next to me, and I'm like, what? It looks like it's like the bark's kind of fell off of it. Mm-hmm. And I go walk up to it, and there's deer hair embedded, like thigh high on the tree.
God.
And I'm like, dude, there was 2 bucks probably locked up, going to war, trying to kill each other, just running into all this stuff. And I mean, God. I've never seen like a sparring site or like a fight site where these bucks had fought before. I've never seen one look this tore up. Like typically you'll find one maybe like,
there'll be some big dugout tracks.
10 to 15 feet wide, something like that. Like, they kind of fought for a couple seconds and then they bounce. This is like, they were going at it for a while.
Yeah.
Okay? And I would have paid to be able to just listen to it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, because when you hear one like that, dude, it is like so much louder than you think it would be. Like like you said it best, they are trying to kill each other.
Yeah. Well, and I told JT this, and this is before JT killed that buck. I was like, hey, dude. And there was also the one really,
bro, you need to be.
There's like one really big scrape down in there, and I didn't have any cameras with me. I'm like, dude, if you got cameras, Like, I know you got one camera in one of these spots. Like, I'd bring like 6 or 8 trail cameras in here, and I'd just scatter them through this area, okay?
Yep.
And first time, I think, the first day he goes back in there right after that rain, freaking killed that buck, which I don't think it was one of the bucks in the fight, because I looked at him. He didn't look like he was missing hair, because whichever bucks were in this fight, you're going to tell, because they're going to have all freaking patches of hair missing off of them from going to war. But it was just crazy, because I've seen like a little bit of hair at a fight, like, where bucks have sparred and fought before. But this is like, I'm talking like clumps of hair, like hair that's like, it's laying there and it's like, 3 inches in diameter of like just deer hair laying there, like back hair and rump hair. And it's just like, God, man, that's crazy.
Someone got their butt whooped.
Yep. So
big time.
But yeah, that was pretty fascinating. But it was cool to see JT go in there and have success and kill a really nice buck.
Hey, that's another spot that just goes to show the annual pattern thing. Me and JT hunted that area like 5 years ago or something, like a long time ago. And actually, we weren't even hunting that particular spot where that saddle he killed his buck in, where it goes over that little logging road. It goes into the other SMZ over near where Pike killed his buck. We started in that SMZ where it kind of branches out, and we put a camera right there, just like looking back, like on nothing. Like, I don't even know what we put the camera on. And we got some deer, but we were like, oh, they got to be coming through here. And eventually I started hunting different areas, but JT kind of stuck right there. And he eventually put that camera right in the middle of that saddle. And for like the last 3 years, he's had studs walking through that thing.
Hammers.
Middle of the day, 10 a.m., 7 a.m., just whenever. Like broad daylight, big bucks. Like big bucks.
Like top percentile buck.
Top 5% bucks for this area, for sure. Walking through there in daylight. And you know, like we're all working and we can't just like live out in the woods and hunt. But it was only a matter of time before, our schedules aligned with a buck. And that was it for JT this weekend. He was able to get out there on a gun hunt. He went and put in his time, and it finally came together in that spot. But that's the culmination of like 3 years of running cameras in that spot. And between like December 1st and December 15th every year, they're coming through there in daylight pretty consistent. Not like every day, but like if you could string together 3 or 4 days of hunting and you stay in there, like you're going to get a crack at a buck. And it worked out for him. So I'm like, I was so thrilled, man. I was really happy that JT got a big one.
Yeah. I was like, he called me. I was actually heading to church that morning, and he's like, hey, and I knew he was hunting that morning because me and him were talking about it and everything. He borrowed that little climbing platform that I got. Yep. And he was going to go in there and try to climb some pine trees and stuff and sit at the head of this little SMZ. And he called me at 7:30, and I'm like, hey, man. He's like, hey. And I'm like, what's up? And I'm like, and the way he was talking, I'm like, he's not in the woods right now. Like, did you like not go hunt? He's like, man, I killed me a big one. Shot me a big one. And I'm like, what are you talking about, dude? He's like, man, he's like, I was sitting there trying to pick out a tree. Rain had just stopped. Been there for 10 minutes. That sucker came off from one hillside down the SMZ, came up the other side, shot him at 40 yards. And I'm like, boy. So.
Yep,
yeah,
same thing. Yeah. Like you see JT calling you at like 7:35 a.m. You're like, oh yeah,
yeah. I'm like,
oh yeah.
I'm like, okay. I'm like, please don't tell me your truck's stuck. So, but yeah, no, that was awesome to kind of see, and but again, it kind of goes back to that area has a concentration of bucks during certain times of the year because JT's had camera in there for so long that he's like. There's an annual pattern in this specific area where there is only a certain window of time you're going to have like mature bucks on camera, and then you will not see them again. I mean, he left his camera out there, dude, all year last year. He went back to pick it up like November the 23rd, 24th, and he had a shooter on camera on the 23rd.
Yeah.
Like right after, or I think it was in the middle of the night at that point, and then put some fresh batteries in it and put the camera back out and everything. But it's like there's like a window of time when he sees like this activity. It's a spot that like there's probably some does moving through there, but for whatever reason the buck's like transitioning through this kind of habitat, through this area during a very short window of time. Yeah. Which kind of goes back to again the advantage like we talked about earlier in this podcast that if you have even if you just have 3 or 4 cameras, if you can put them in areas kind of like what we've talked about, whether it's on like a primary community scrape. Or like, and again, like in JT's standpoint, he's not putting it on a scrape. He's putting it on a travel corridor, just a funnel.
Like Perry.
Yeah, just like Michael Perry. And you can figure out if you can suck it up and leave it in there for at least 3 or 4 months.
Yep.
And just see what happens. It might you might feel like it's a waste because you don't really get much on it. Kind of like the camera you just went and pulled, and there's like one good deer, but that camera's been in there since turkey season.
Yeah. Man, when I went and got that camera, I'm like, why did I put this camera out? I must have been delirious because I'd walked so far at that point, and I've been up so long. I was like, whatever. I came this far. I'm putting this freaking camera out somewhere.
Or it could be like on the flip side, like JT, where like he finds the X and now has, a bunch of different deer to kind of go after. So that kind of just goes back to I think there's a huge advantage if you have the resources to have enough cameras to go do this, how valuable it can be, especially if it's whether it's your hunting club, family farm, lease, public land, it doesn't matter. If you know you're going to be able to hunt this for a couple years, and it's not just like a 1 year thing. I don't know if I'm going to be able to hunt it again next year. There's so much information that you can learn from doing something like what JT's done.
Oh yeah, dude, 100%. And like we'll get questions about it pretty often, of like how to scout area or like where to put your cameras. I'll say if you live in like Georgia, for instance, just hypothetically, if you live in Georgia and you want to extend your season and you want to hop on over to Alabama and catch this like really late rut that we got,
like a lot of you Georgia folks already do,
like a lot of y'all already do. But let's say that your vacation time's gone, or you just can't spend a lot more time, travel. Like you can't go spend 4 days in Alabama hunting. Well, if you could get 1 day, and you could pick out wherever you want to go, whether it's like a private piece you got or some public, and go out there and like, sure, take the gun, take the bow, but like just freaking walk it and have 2 or 3 trail cameras and stick them out. And let them sit through the rut. Let them sit through the end of season, and
especially if you can't get back and hunt.
Come get them whenever you can get them. Come get them in June if you have to. That will be way more valuable than you like coming over here and just climbing a tree and hoping you kill a deer.
Yeah.
If I had like for instance, if the roles were reversed and I was going to like Tennessee over the next 2 or 3 weeks and I had 2 days to hunt, but I knew it was something I wanted to do next year too, I'd probably just walk for 2 days. Like I might set up on the second day in like the afternoon if I've kind of walked everything I want to walk, but I want to get out, I want to deploy cameras because I want that annual pattern because that is like gold. It is like gold, having those annual patterns and being able to take advantage of that. So I think that's the subject of this podcast, man. That's the kind of thing that fires me up because it's been something that's worked for us for a couple of years now, and it's becoming like my main thing. I mean, it's kind of like what I'm out of all the stuff that we talk about on the podcast and all the people that we interview, like my main tactic I feel like I'm kind of like going into is scrapes and annual patterns because it's just, especially for somebody like me, I got limited time to hunt. A lot of people listening to this are in a really similar situation. So it's like if you can't just go spend a lot of time in the woods every year and you have to be more precise, annual patterns are going to be your best friend for sure.
Yep.
So it's worked out good for me. We had a question like 2 weeks ago about that, about having like a higher ratio or whatever of hunts, and that's how it's been this year for me so far. And I think that's why it's the annual pattern thing. Like I'm able to go in and just get it done like kind of fast if I have an annual pattern. I'm not like, guys like Andy May are really good at going and just getting it done in like a brand new area really fast. I'm not good at that. But I'm starting to figure out the annual pattern thing for sure.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said about it. Making an investment where you're going to hunt this for a couple years.
Yeah.
So let's get to some Q&As.
Let's do it.
Well, where can people do the Q&As? Where can they submit those?
So listener Q&As, you can submit down the show notes of the podcast and also on the YouTube video. Again, if you're watching the podcast on YouTube right now, there's a link down below to submit your listener Q&A for us to be able to kind of answer on these outro episodes. Or you can also just go, if you don't want to do that, you want to make it a little more difficult on yourself, you can just go to the southernoutdoorsmen.com, and there's a tab on the website for listener Q&As, along with listener success stories. Again, you guys have been hammering some bucks over the last 2 weeks, and love seeing the listener success stories come in. We just had one guy, what is his name? Last name Knight.
Tate
Knight, I think, from Georgia, killed a giant.
Killed a hammer.
Dude, listen, Tate, congratulations, man, because that's one hell of a taxidermy bill. I swear, if you Euro mounted that deer, you're a savage. Or if you just cut the horns off, God bless you, dude. Listen.
That's a flex if you do that. You looking it up?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Tate Knight. Yeah.
Tate
Absolute
Knight,
giant deer.
Georgia. Yeah, we've got a bunch of like big deer on
Yeah.
Listener Success Stories. Y'all putting us to shame.
Yeah. I'm like, huh. Like, you want to share a pen with a brother?
Yeah, for real. All right, this is from Joseph Peebles from Alabama. He said, "Have y'all ever saw a doe open up / work a scrape? Saw and heard a few do this. What does that mean when this happens? Does it only happen when the deer population is out of proportion?" No, I would say it does not happen when the deer population is out of proportion. It's very it's normal. Like does and bucks work scrapes, and you'll have does like work a licking branch, kind of any time. I mean, they will do it outside of the rut, but it's like when you're coming into the rut and you have a camera on a big old fat community scrape in a good travel corridor, and you have a doe come in and she's all up in that licking branch and she's just going crazy and she's wagging her tail and she's doing all kinds of stuff, like, man, you better get in there.
I think we've had 3 does in the last 2 or 3 days actually come in to one of these community scrapes, paw the ground, open it up, which it's already open, they're gigantic.
Yeah.
And then hit the licking branch and then kind of mosey on.
Yep.
Like, I mean, so like, yes, does absolutely will work a scrape, but I think it's during a very short window of time. I don't think they're not going to work a scrape as early. Like I say, work a scrape. I'm not talking about hitting the licking branch. I'm talking about like actually working the ground itself.
Yeah, pawing the ground out.
They're probably not going to do that as early as a buck's going to do it, clearly. But when you start getting around prime time, when that doe is like, hey, I'm starting to feel pretty good.
Yep.
I think that's when they're probably going to start implementing that a little bit more and start doing it. And then when that happens, you better be in there. So again, we've got does doing it right now. We need to be in there in the next 3 to 4 days, 5 days, 6 days.
Yep, 100%. All right, next up, this is from man, I'm sorry if I get this name wrong. Savino Lugo from Alabama. Sorry if I got your name wrong. Did the best I could. He said, "Hey guys, great videos and lots of detail and information. I'm 25 and have zero experience in hunting. I recently came into possession of 120 acres of land to hunt. I'm licensed and already have a rifle that I'm proficient with. As a beginner, what should I do to get started?" Jacob, you got all fired up there a little bit.
Let me know what county it is, man. I will guide you on the hunt. I ain't going to take a weapon, dude. That sounds like a good time.
No, that's awesome. You got 120 acres, man. That is freaking awesome.
When you say you come in possession, did you get like access or do you actually own the property?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That's a good question. Now, it depends on how the property sets up. I'll say that first. Is it all timber? Is it mostly hardwoods, mostly pines? Is it mostly pine trees and then little hardwood ranges, little SMZs running through it? Is there open fields on it? Does it have a little bit of ag? If you're in Alabama, probably not, unless you're in a couple different spots of Alabama. Is it on a major river? Does it have a creek system running through it? There's a bunch of different factors, and also, is it hilly or is it flat?
Yeah.
So there's a bunch of different factors there. Andrew, before I go on a ramble, what would be some of your things to pay attention to?
Without overcomplicating it, I would say walk the property as best you can. 120 acres is pretty big, but it's not giant. You can cover that pretty quickly. So if you have terrain, like let's say it's terrain and there's hills on it, but it's like big timber, like you can literally go out there knowing nothing and literally just walk around. And what you're naturally going to do is you're going to follow the path of least resistance, and the deer are going to do that too. And so you're going to run into deer sign doing that. If there's something on the property, like if there's any timber management on the property, like cutovers from the past, pine thickets, if there's any kind of habitat diversity on the property, I would go and hit all those edges. And I would just go walk all the edges. Oh, camera checking. Oh, what is that, a coon? Oh, no, it's a fox.
The fox was on both cameras.
What?
Yep, right there.
That's interesting.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
So I would go walk all the habitat edges. And even if your habitat edges are the property lines, walk the property lines and look at those edges because those are going to be the things that hold the deer. So, like, really just start by doing that. And then once you have a good inventory of what the sign looks like, then everything else can kind of start falling into place. Like then you can determine like, What kind of sign is this? What does it mean? Where's the feed at?
But the problem is, brand new hunter might not know exactly what certain sign may look like in great detail. So
That's why he's listening to the
well,
Southern Outdoorsman podcast.
that's very true. So you need to familiarize yourself with what a scrape will look like, what
Yep.
rubs look like, of course, what a deer track looks like, and then deer droppings,
Yes.
scat, whatever you want to call it, poop, whatever you want to say. So you need to understand like what all that kind of looks like, and then also what does that mean. If there's creeks on the property, definitely walk the creeks itself. If they're really deep, just walk like one bank or the other and look for crossings. Like look for a trail, which will look like it looks like a little tiny little hiking trail.
Yep.
Be about 6-8 inches wide, coming down from one side, crossing the creek, and look for tracks in there.
Yep.
Again, if you're a brand new deer hunter, don't worry about going to kill a big buck. Just go kill some deer. Okay.
Yeah.
You get 3 buck tags. If you want to shoot, 3 decent bucks, you want to kill a spike. And I think in Alabama you gotta have one with 3 points on one side. I think for one of your deer,
I
or
think so.
4 points, 3 points, whatever.
I think it's 3 for
So
one
just,
of them.
So just go have fun with it. But those creeks would be great for just finding tracks and trail crossings right there. Also, look at if you're using like Onyx and you look at your aerial imagery, walk your habitat edges. So if it's all timber, there's no open fields or anything like that, and there's no clear cuts where they're coming through and cutting all the timber out. Look at where you have like pines to hardwoods. Again, pines will be green on aerial imagery. Hardwoods, especially in the fall time image, like Onyx has that recent aerial imagery feature now. That I can't talk. That filter, and you can actually just walk the edge of those hardwoods and those pines, or walk any kind of habitat edge. If you're walking through the woods, and like what Andrew's saying, like you're kind of taking the path of least resistance, which I was going to ask you, how would you describe the path of least resistance?
The path that has the least resistance.
So the natural path you just kind of tend to go.
I mean, like instead of walking up the super steep slope, you walk up where it's not quite as steep.
Okay.
Or instead of walking over the tip top of the ridge, you go around the edge of the ridge where it's not, you don't have to walk up and over.
Good
So
clarification.
path of least resistance.
So while you're doing that, if you happen to come upon like other habitat edges, or maybe there's like some shrubbery, if you got creeks on the place, you may have like Chinese privet, which is an invasive plant species that's pretty widespread in the southeast. If you have like a thick row of that or a thick bunch of that, walk to the edge of it, and that's those edges, those subtle habitat edges where you have like different age timber or different plant species kind of coming together. That's where you're going to find a lot of your path of travel for a lot of deer. You should find scrapes, you should find rubs there, probably going to find tracks, deer beds, all that kind of stuff. And you kind of pay attention to that. Now, for rifle hunting, there's a couple episodes you might want to go back and listen to, specifically, hunting some of this kind of stuff. But I would say, I can't say your name again.
Oh, I changed.
Oh, well, anyways, write in. I'd love for you to write back in and give us a little more information on what the property actually looks like, and maybe we can go in more in depth on another Q&A, on a future episode.
Yeah, for sure. And also, I'd go into the annual pattern thing. Like, if you can go get you a $28 Tasco camera from Walmart, or go buy 15 Browning cameras, like whatever you want to do. I would invest in a couple trail cameras and put them on the property, even if you're not sure what to put them on. Just like get them out there, get them on a deer trail, get them on a creek crossing, like what you were saying, and that's something that's going to pay you next year. It's going to pay you back. You're making an investment in your deer hunting. All right, this one is from Ty Valentine from Arkansas. He said, do you have any way to determine potential hunting pressure when picking clear cuts to rifle hunt? I know you can usually expect other hunters in public land spots that are obvious on a map, like ponds and food plots. Ponds, interesting. Especially when access is nearby. Clear cuts tend to be obvious on maps and have some kind of trail/road to them. So what factors do make you think that a specific clear cut will draw too many people? Thanks in advance. Ooh, that's an interesting one.
Number one factor, tell you right now, I'm going to cut you off. If there's a lot of good climbable, for if there's a lot of pine trees or oaks or around the edge of it, or poplars or whatever, that someone can take a climbing tree and a climber and climb up to 25 or 30 feet without hitting a limb, you're going to have guys there. Okay.
100%.
And of course, if it's not too terribly far from access road, if it's less than half a mile from access path and it's not a terrible walk, like you don't have to walk through a lot of thick stuff to get there, you're probably going to have company.
Yep.
The clear cuts that I think we've had a lot of success on, you don't have a lot of trees on the edge of them that you can get a climbing tree stand in.
Yeah.
Every now and then, we've had success using climbers in some spots where, like, maybe it's a really far off clear cut, or you get on the back side of a clear cut, like if the access road's on one side, but that's like the closest access, but there's another access road I can come in from that's 3/4 of a mile away, but I can come into the back side of that clear cut. Sometimes by just doing that, coming from the back side and getting on the back side of where the access road is, that's maybe a little bit closer to the clear cut, you can kind of get on the back side of some of that hunting pressure. Because the thing is, you can still have success, killing a nice buck, especially during the rut, on a clear cut, even if there's a couple other guys sitting on it. Okay?
100%.
So I'll give you a great example. Last year situation, me and Andrew walked to a spot, hunted a clear cut, maybe a little close to the road, really close to the road.
Pretty close.
And actually, where I climbed, I could see the trucks. And we had a guy walk in on us. We had been sitting in the stand I've been sitting in the stand for 30, 45 minutes in the dark, and it still was 30 minutes before daylight. And we had a guy walks in 30 yards from me, and I talked to him, I'm like, what you doing? I said, man, I'm going to go back in this area. My buddy's sitting 125 yards back behind me, okay? And long story short, he goes and climbs a tree 20 yards from Andrew.
Yep.
Andrew has
Not a fun morning.
Andrew had a little hissy fit. Got down, went and hunted a different spot. But this dude was sitting on the back side of me, like literally 125 yards away from me. I saw 2 different bucks that morning that he didn't see, and he saw a buck that I didn't see.
Yeah.
In 125 yards from each other. So to me, I'm not so worried about the hunting pressure, as long as like they're just not going in there and just like hammering a ton of deer.
It also depends on the clear cut too, because the one you're talking about is like chest high sage grass, hard to see into.
Yep.
Like you got to climb way up, and
Yep.
even then, it's still hard to see a deer in it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like a brand new clear cut and it's like barren ground, and there's like little bunch grasses all over the place, but it's open and you can kind of watch the whole thing easily.
That's a problem.
That's different.
Yeah.
If it's kind of thicker and it's got cover, because you climb 40 feet in that pine tree, and you're still only really looking at like a little 150-yard bubble around you where you got a good enough angle to like see down into that tall grass. Like you might see something further out there, like bits and pieces of it, but it's gonna be really hard.
Yeah.
So that's that specific situation. But I agree, if it's got perfect climbable trees all over it, I mean, yeah, there's gonna be guys hunting it, but I wouldn't really worry about it. It's such good habitat that I wouldn't worry about it a lot. But also,
the size of the clear cut matters.
the size of the clear cut, and by definition, every 100% of clear cuts have a road going straight to them, and people will walk a road for a long, long, long ways.
Yep.
Oh, we forgot to talk about barefoot guy. Oh, we're gonna talk about that after this Q&A.
Yeah.
People will. It doesn't matter if it's like a mile and a half.
Mhm.
Somebody's walking to that clear cut, for sure.
Mhm.
It's happening. Whether or not there's a lot of people walking to it's a different story. So I mean, obviously, the further away it is from where you have to park, the better, and the harder it is to actually walk to it, the better. So it's like if you got to park at a gate or a trailhead or whatever, and walk a mile to the clear cut, but on the way to that clear cut, you got to go down one big old drainage and back up the other side, and then down another drainage and back up. Then that's gonna cut down significantly on the amount of people getting back there.
Yeah.
And if it's a 200-acre clear cut way back there, and there's one other dude who's hardcore enough to walk that far in hunting it, I don't really worry about that.
Yeah.
Like he might end up killing the buck, whatever, but it's not like you're dealing with the masses coming in, and hopefully you run into that guy and you can strike something up with him, and you guys can kind of share a little bit of information and help each other out.
Yeah, to me, the size of the clear cut matters. Like if it's a 15 to 20 acre clear cut, which we don't typically see a whole bunch of those, that's going to be hunting pressure on that could be more intense than if you have a 100-acre clear cut, or even bigger than that. Where like, if it's a 100-acre clear cut, you could be on one side. There could be a guy 400 yards across the other side. There's deer in the middle that don't know either one of you guys are potentially there.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge deal for me if it's like a really big clear cut. So I would take that into consideration as well. And also like what Andrew was saying, what you were saying, if it's a very young clear cut, like 1 to maybe 2 years old, where it's like You could if you climb up 30-foot tree, you can shoot almost the whole thing.
Yeah.
And say it's kind of flat and there's just not a whole bunch of cover, and the deer still use it. That's going to have more hunting pressure because you could also have guys hunting off the ground and not even using climbing stands. And I know some guys that hunt local to us that have had a tremendous amount of success. Try to get him on the podcast. He don't want to come on the podcast, but killed some huge deer. And he loves, one of the guys specifically loves to ground hunt clear cuts and just walk the edges of them.
Yep.
And like just slip hunt, still hunt around them, and just catch bucks coming in and out of or parallel in those clear cuts. And that can work for you too. I haven't had success. I haven't really tried doing that though. But when you start getting in a clear cut that's like 3-4 years old, when it's like those pine trees, if they're planting pines back, which a lot of us in the Southeast, if they're going to clear cut something, they're going to probably plant pines back. But I've also been in other states where they clear cut and they just let it naturally and regenerate with like hardwood saplings and stuff because they don't have sweet gums for whatever reason. Those might take a lot longer for them to get aged out, but in the Southeast, the deep South, if they're planting pines within 3 to 4 years, 3 years, those pine trees are going to be chest high. 4 years, those pine trees might be 7-8 feet tall. And when they get that high, depending on how tight of a, what's it called, basal area? I mean, they plant per acre.
Yeah.
Because I've seen some.
Well, that's not really basal area.
Okay,
but
what's the term, Mister? I went to forestry school at Auburn.
You put me on the spot. It's not basal area.
Damn, you failed that class.
Basal area would be when they cut. If you imagine they cut all the trees down and then they measure the area of the stumps.
Okay.
That is basal area.
Okay. Well, yeah,
so basal area, it could be like a high basal area if you have like giant freaking trees, or it could be a high basal area if you have a high density of decent sized trees.
Okay. Well, there's a clear cut close to us.
Yeah.
The right hand side of the road when you drive back out of here going to town.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I've never seen a clear cut planted that thick with pine trees.
Oh, really?
I don't know if you've noticed on the right hand side of the road, it is literally
I'm trying. Wait, what part of town is it in?
No, like if you go towards town right here before you hit the 4-way, right on the right hand side, there's a clear cut right here on the right side across from that little bean field.
Oh.
And it is the densest I've ever seen a clear cut planted with pines.
I saw a big old buck walking into that a couple weeks ago.
But what I'm saying is, it is those pine tree saplings and it's young. Those pine trees are only probably. Those saplings are probably 2 years old. They are so tight, there is no grass growing. Okay, the clear cuts I like. I've never seen something like that in public land where they're that tightly planted. But a lot of times, like in the areas that we typically hunt, they'll plant them and they'll be spaced out enough that there's gonna be like broom sedge and big blue stem and all this other kind of grasses growing up. And when you get to like 3 years old, like you'll have pine trees that are like chest high, whatever, but you're gonna have all this grass growing up, which also makes it really hard to see the deer, but they can slip through it real easy. That's what I like to hunt, because when it gets that big, you cannot hunt on the ground. Like if you hunt on the ground, you can only kill them if they get on the edge or maybe walk through a roadbed or something crossing it. But if you can climb up 25, 35 feet up, you can kind of see down into it and you can get bits and pieces. And I've killed 2 bucks last couple of years in areas just like that where you get up real high, you look down into it, and like you can't always see the deer, but you see him right here, and then he might disappear for a little bit, and he'll pop out right here in this little opening, and you take a shot.
100%. Yeah, and going back to the original question, like how can you predict whether or not like there's going to be hunting pressure? And especially, if guys are coming from up north and they're coming down south this time of year, or they're looking at coming down south to extend their season a little bit, like if it's a clear cut, it's getting hunted. Somebody's hunting that clear cut, 100%, bet money on it. But again, going back to the thing, if it's a really big clear cut, it's not a big deal. So we've had some areas in the past where, there's been a large clear cut that's hard enough to get to that it knocks out some of the pressure, but there's still, a decent number of guys hunting it that we run into. I'm thinking of South Alabama where we ran into Old Scram, and that
huge
area,
clear cut,
massive cut. And, I mean, there's probably 10 other guys hunting that thing.
Yeah.
But it's so big that it didn't matter. I mean, that sucker was slam full of bucks and does. So, any obstacle you can put between you and the clear cut obviously is going to cut down on people. So those are just kind of rules of thumb. If you've got like a flat road bed that goes straight to it and you only got to walk a couple hundred yards, like that thing is going to get hammered.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. But, other than that, dude, we got to talk about Barefoot Guy before we wrap this thing up. So me and you were on this hilly, kind of more ridge unit that we were hunting, and we were walking up this one particular ridge. It's just like a long ridge system, and it's where our cameras are at. It's where we ended up putting our cameras at. But this is the day we went to go put those cameras out. We haven't really seen anybody else in here last year. And we go walking in. There's a couple trucks in the area, but there was no trucks parked like where we parked and we're walking into. So I'm like, okay, yeah, nobody's in here. And last year we found some spots where some guys had sat on the ground. They'd scraped out a little spot for themselves to sit. And so we know people are hunting it. But we go walking in there, and we're 3/4 of a mile back one way. So we've just been walking one way the whole time, 3/4 of a mile, side hilling through pretty rough stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like thick mountain laurel, you got to crawl over crap, and
a place where you get bit by a timber rattle snake in a heartbeat.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
It was warm that day too.
Yeah,
because we were in t-shirts walking.
Yes, 100%. And so we're like way back in here, and I suddenly hear like a child's voice.
Yeah,
which is off-putting, and that I'm like looking around.
You heard voices?
I turned around to you. I was like, "Did you hear that?" And like,
I could see him up the trail.
And then
up the little ridge.
So I hear like a little kid's voice, and I'm like, "Did you just hear that?" And I turn around to you, and then I look back, and here comes this dude and his kid walking towards us. You know, kind of side hilling around this ridge. Guys in camo, wearing a hat and everything, like a big old what was he wearing? Boonie hat. And they walk up, and then we're like, "Hey, what's up, man?" And you know, we exchanged some words for him. He's like, he was talking about seeing a bunch of scrapes up ahead. He's
pawings.
Yeah, he called them pawings.
Oh, a bunch of pawings up there.
That's a North Alabama thing right there, dude.
Yep.
Well, other people like I hear Arkansas guys. Sonny McCumpsey calls them pawings.
Yeah.
But that in Alabama, I only hear that in like North Alabama.
Yeah.
Nobody says that anywhere else. But he's like, there's a couple pollens up there. Like, y'all probably kill that buck this afternoon. Like, you'll probably see him. He's got him fresh tore up. I'm like, oh, dude, I appreciate it, man. And I was like, you see that rub back down the trail? He's like, no, I must have missed that.
And remember, so
and this is also what I'm talking about, by the way, with like kind of chatting it up with other hunters that you run into and just see what they say, man.
More context. This guy doesn't have a backpack, doesn't have a weapon. He's just in camouflage.
Yep.
Walking with this kid who's not in camouflage, wearing jeans and some, kid can't be 7 years old, little boy.
Yep.
And anyways, while he's talking, Andrew's like cutting the conversation. I just happened to look down, and I just realized this dude is barefoot with some of the palest feet I've ever seen, walking through some gnarly stuff. You could not pay me to walk back in there barefoot. Ain't no way. Listen, I'm too heavy set, and I got too soft of feet, bro. That would not happen.
You got dishwasher hands, got dishwasher feet,
man,
whatever.
Dude, oh my god. Yeah, no. And I thought you noticed.
No, I didn't.
So
see.
like, we go to
like no socks.
No, just
barefoot.
I'm talking barefoot with some hairy toes, bro. I mean, a Maxwell special.
He's grounding with the earth.
And I'm telling you, like, we're walking through some stuff that, like, even with the boots, like, you might, like, roll your ankle on some of this. There's rocks, sticks, thorns,
He got
briars.
them monkey feet. He can grip the side of the hill in them feet.
Dude, he's got some asphalt feet, dude. He's got some feet that are got to be rock solid, okay?
After running into him being barefoot back there, it made me want to go walk in there barefoot, see if I can do it.
Ain't no way in hell.
I could do it for sure.
Okay.
Dude, I go barefoot. It was actually a running joke when I started dating Tiffany, because on our first date, I was barefoot. And and her dad on like our first date, there was like a city park in the town we grew up in, and there's like a little creek going through it, and they were supposed to meet me at the creek or whatever, like meet me at the park, and they found me, and I was in the creek, and I was barefoot, and I did not have shoes with me, and I was like far from my home, and I didn't have any shoes or anything, and I just remember like looking up at my now father-in-law Steve, and he was standing up on the creek bank, like looking down in the creek at me. He's like, really? Like, this is the guy? Anyways, all that to say, dude, I love going barefoot. Well, I think I could do it.
Okay. Well, you have that. So when we turned to walk away, I thought we were going to get like 10, 15 yards, and you were stopping, but what was up with his bare feet? And like, you never stopped. It's like, Andrew. And I'm like, you stopped, and you're like, what? And I'm like, did you not look at his feet? And you're like, no, what are you talking about? I'm like, he had no shoes. No shoes. No socks. I'm talking about pale white feet. Like, this dude had no tan, okay? Pale white feet. Into some hairy toes, man. And I'm talking barefoot and leaves, sticks and briars.
No equipment whatsoever.
No, I mean, no backpack.
He had a pistol.
No, did he?
Yeah, he had a pistol.
Oh, I didn't notice that. He's a little sidearm.
That's all you need, bro.
Dude, listen, I'm just like, God, man. And you're like, oh, dude. I was like, there is no freaking way. Like, he's going to get tagged by a copperhead or a timber rattlesnake on the way back to the car, dude.
That's all right. It's all part of the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, until you miss the toe. And like,
Dude, I'm telling you, man. Like, if you got some like ambidextrous feet or whatever, like you can kind of move them toes, grip stuff. You remember that time that we went scouting on we went to Oak Mountain State Park and we filmed a freaking scouting video because like you can't hunt there, or at least you can't really like it's not open hunting.
Yeah.
So we went there to go film a scouting video, and I forgot my boots that day, and so I was in some like raggedy old tennis shoes that didn't have any tread on them. And you were impressed with when we went up on the mountain because, dude, I got monkey feet, son. I can grip the side of the hill with my feet. I swear.
In tennis shoes?
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah, I remember, but yeah, no.
You were impressed.
Yeah.
I didn't fall one time.
Yeah.
You fell.
Yeah.
I didn't fall. You were wearing your lows. I was in tennis shoes. I never fell.
Yep. No. Anyway, yeah, you probably could relate with him, but I was like, that dude, psycho, man. Like that.
That after you told me that, I'm like, I like that guy now. Like, I bet that guy's a killer, dude. I bet he goes up in there and freaking cleans up. I bet he kills some good bucks.
Cuts the antlers off him. he ain't mounting nothing.
I bet he's been killing freaking bucks up there for 20 years. You know, like I bet that guy.
And he looked like straight. He looked straight up like a mountain man. I'm talking big old like gray/black beard, boonie hat. You know, looked like a
As soon as I saw that guy, I was like, I like this guy.
Yeah, I was like, man, not trying to judge or anything, but he looked like a guy that would definitely be like one of the main characters in Moonshiners, the TV show. I mean, dude, fit the bill. I'm like, where's the steel at, man?
Yeah.
Okay, where's the hooch? Because I mean, he looked spot on like it. That he's
He had a little bit of copper tubing with him.
had a soldering iron with him. He was
and hey, later that day, we ended up finding a freaking corn pile back there.
a mile and a half back.
Way back there with a Tacticam on it. And we were coming out way after dark because we did a big loop and we're like, well, hey, let's get up here and let's ease around. Like, we'll just set those two cameras in the dark because those last two cameras we already knew where we were gonna put them. So it's not like we were like still trying to scout. So we're like, we can do those in the dark. So we were taking our time. We ended up making it to the last spot where we were putting a camera a little bit before dark so we could sit there the last 30 minutes and call. So we sit there and we call, don't see anything, set that camera in the dark, walk to the next spot, set that camera in the dark. So it's like it's like way after dark at this point. And we're walking out with our headlamps and everything, and we get back up on top of this big old freaking ridge. And we're trying to find a scrape you found last year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like over an hour past dark at this point. And we're looking around for the scrape, and I look down at my headlamp, and I'm like, there's freaking corn right here.
Yeah, I was like, what? What are you
talking
about?
There's like corn everywhere. I'm like, there's freaking corn right here. And immediately, as soon as I see corn, I'm like, there's a camera somewhere. And I start looking around, and I turn around, and I'm like, and a Tacticam. Looky there. And that dude's got a nice shot of my face, like looking right at his Tacticam with a headlamp from like 10 feet away.
Yeah, and dude, that's so frustrating because it's a spot that I would love to go.
It's in a great spot,
but it's
I'm like, you idiot!
Why'd you bring?
You didn't need corn.
You don't need corn in that area. I mean, you don't need corn, period. But like, it's illegal to do on public land. But like, that area is already such a good area. Like, you don't need it, man. It's such a good funnel. But in the corn, the thing about it, so, it's anyone like if you've ever like messed around with like corn right out of the bag, it has like a dry powdery substance.
Yeah,
it's got got like this grit on it. That corn had just been put out and it had rained 2 days beforehand, and it hadn't sat out there and had dew on it. No. So I'm like, I think old boy.
I don't think it was him.
Well, there's somebody else up in there
because where he came from, he was already like kind of past that spot, and he didn't have like a bag or anything with him.
Might have gone and ditched it down in the ditch or something. I don't know.
No. That doesn't make any sense. If somebody's like walking in there to put corn out, most of the time, at least when I find corn on public, they're not walking like 500 yards to go like hide the bag. They're just gonna throw it off to the edge or stuffing it in a log or something like that.
Oh, we didn't look in all the logs. But long story short, someone had just put corn out there, and I'm like, you're a god freaking idiot, man, idiot. So
yeah, I think it had been put out that morning for sure. It's so stupid because I'm like, well, now this spot's burned because we can't go hunt it because and God forbid someone walks in there and hunts it. Like if we didn't know that corn was there and we walk in there and we're hunting that spot.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, here comes the game warden. Like, you're getting a ticket. You'd be like, well, I didn't know that corn was there. The game warden would be like, yeah, okay. you know?
Absolutely. And that was a spot I hunted the last day of that hunt last year when you shot your buck. And the sign was so good in that spot because it's like, this is like this ridge system kind of like it kind of like bends and goes down the hill, and there's like one side of the ridge is like real thick, and like the top's kind of open, but the side's real thick. And like I got off on that side, and dude, there were scrapes and rubs. I'm like, dude, I might kill me a buck right here this last evening. And you shot your buck 45 minutes before dark, so I climbed down early and had 3 does walking right to me as I was climbing down and busted them. But again, it's right where this dude put that corn out. I'm like, you're God, yeah, that's super frustrating.
Yeah,
Shane Park said the same thing happened to him. He made a Facebook post about it. Some of his spots he's been on some national forest and some like bigger pieces of public that like guys have gone in there, put corn out, and he's like, now I can't even hunt the area. Like, it was good already, like there was big deer there, but someone put corn out, and now I can't even be in the general area because same reason. Like, you go in there, and some people might not realize this if you don't like hunt public land or whatever, but like if you're in the general area, and I don't know what a game would say would be like hunted a bait area, like how close you'd have to be, but
it's probably line of sight. Like, if you can see it, for sure you're getting busted.
Probably.
If you're like 300 yards away and you can't see it, they're not going to. They can't.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, but if you're say within 100 yards or something like that, and you don't know it's there, and like you said, game mark comes in, like you're screwed.
Yeah.
And that's just so unfortunate because I'm like, dude, whoever put that in there, it was a mile and a half from the truck, roughly, give or take.
Yeah.
And you put all that effort in to come dump corn out. I'm like, just put that effort in and go kill a buck without the corn because like you can do it in that spot. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm like, you moron! Like, open your eyes to all the bucks on here. They're already here.
Yeah.
Why are you putting the corn out?
Yeah.
It's stupid, man. Like, it's aggravating, and but we were joking about it because we were standing there and looking at this guy's trail camera. I'm like, this guy's sitting on his couch right now, and he's getting tac cam notifications. He's like, crap! Like, he probably just put that corn out, and now he's got 2 dudes in like the middle of the night standing in front of his camera. He's probably so confused. If he didn't get a great picture of us, he's probably like, oh my God, it's the game warden. Maybe he's not going back in there. So we're going to have to walk past that spot most likely at some point when we go actually hunt this area.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll be curious to see if that corn is still there. So
I mean, that corn won't be, but
well, I mean, if he's put more corn out. Yeah. So anyways, that was all Barefoot Guy. Yeah. I mean, and the Corn Bandit.
Corn Bandit, yeah.
So, yep, fun times. All right, we got a review that we're gonna read. I think we already did that one, right?
Maybe not.
Or is that?
I think that's the last one we did.
All right, I'm gonna let you take this one.
All right, so pretty sure everybody been leaving us reviews on Apple Podcasts. Again, like I think 70-something% of you guys listen on iPhones and Apple products. So you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can leave us a 5-star written review. Like try to read off those new reviews when they come in. So this is from Mac Daddy Nader, and it's 5 stars. The best dang deer hunting podcast. If you're looking to fill your freezer and cover your wall this fall, look no further than these guys right here. They will have you sitting in a deer's lap in 10 minutes on opening day. I'm already tagged out in November. Usually I'm swatting skeeters this time of year. I was smacking bucks. I love these guys. Don't be afraid to start backtracking episodes. These guys are as legit from the day. These guys are as legit from day one as they are right now. Never stop learning and always keep it Southern. Nader.
Nice. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, don't be afraid to backtrack episodes. There's a gold mine in our back catalog of podcast guests, and we're working on doing some playlists of the classics. There's 2 playlists on our website right now where you can go and kind of get some deep cuts.
Again, the southernoutdoorsmen.com.
All right. This is from Public Hunter Noob. Best hunting podcast out there, 5 stars. Because I hunt in western North Carolina, most hunting podcasts don't apply to me. Not the case with the Southern Outdoorsman. I found this podcast about 6 months ago and have since then deleted all other hunting-related podcasts from my library. Nice. Eliminate the competition. I really appreciate the guests and relatability of Jacob and Andrew. It's refreshing to hear guys who have day jobs and family obligations discuss deer hunting. Keep doing what you're doing, guys. Appreciate that, man. I'm glad to hear the content applies to you. That's why we made the podcast, because we felt the same way. There wasn't anything out there that applied to what we were doing, so we're like, well, shoot, let's just make it.
Going on almost 6 years. 6 years in February.
Man, that's wild.
I know, it's crazy. So
when we started it too, at the very beginning, you were like, "Hey, man, let's just do this. Let's put our heads down and just look up in 6 years and see where we're at."
I think
You remember
5. I think I said 5 years.
No, you said 6. I remember, because I was like,
Okay.
6 is a weird number to say, because
Okay.
I thought you were going to say 5, but you said 6.
Yeah.
And here we are at 6 years.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Crazy.
Yep. Appreciate it all. I can't talk. Appreciate you guys for listening and watching.
Jacob
on
still
YouTube.
hasn't learned how to read.
Yeah, no, that never was taught as a child. No,
Man from Alabama.
I'm just trying to play into the stereotype, Roll Tide. So,
Born in Alabama, educated in Arkansas. It just didn't work out for you.
sure, all those Arkansas listeners really enjoy that. But anyway, so appreciate everybody's been watching the podcast, but also listening. But it's been really cool kind of seeing a lot of y'all's comments coming in from the YouTube channel. Again, all these episodes are on YouTube. At least started doing video podcasts starting around June of this year. So it's been really cool to kind of see some of the engagement and some of y'all's questions and everything throughout some of these episodes on YouTube. So appreciate the support there. Again, if you're not currently watching these podcast episodes on YouTube, which actually I've seen some comments, Sandra, I don't know if you've seen these, where guys have been commenting like, does anybody else watch this podcast instead of just listening to it? And it's kind of surprising the amount of responses that guy specifically had, those couple people got. So we appreciate everybody's been kind of watching the YouTube channel and kind of watching these episodes. And again, it adds a little bit more of a I'm gonna call it a little Riz, okay?
Riz?
Yeah, from the old PBD podcast. A little.
I haven't heard that on there.
Are you kidding? You don't listen to it enough, clearly.
I mean, I've been listening for a couple weeks.
Oh man,
No, I haven't heard that.
You ain't heard the Riz?
No.
Well, yeah. Well, you're getting the Riz on this podcast. So, old sick Maxwell here.
I know.
But
I'm gonna get you sick now.
But yeah, but watching the podcast definitely there's a different aspect to it that I think a lot of people truly enjoy. So maybe you'll enjoy it too. So check us out on the YouTube channel again, the Southern Outdoors Men on YouTube. And also appreciate everybody's been buying all of our hats. We actually just sold out for the second time the old school camo hat.
Yeah, that's why you don't see it. Whoever's the last one to order, I should have looked him up before we start, but you got the display model. So the one that always sits up here, I had to ship that one out. So we got a bunch more on the way, though. So we got another shipment in. We can't keep those suckers in stock.
Yeah, but we still have my favorite hat, which is this one right here. For all the YouTube viewers, you can see this. For all the audio listeners, it's what we call a chocolate chip hat. It's brown on brown patch hat. Looks awesome. I freaking wear this hat almost every single day.
Earth tone patch. You could turkey hunt in this hat.
Oh yeah, it's
Getting ready for spring,
bow
baby.
hunt in it, whatever. It's
And
great.
hey, we got I just paid up the invoice, and our Blaze Orange hats just went into production. So got a big old shipment of those coming in next, because again, we sold out of those super fast.
Yeah, so all you Alabama guys, Mississippi guys are still hunting, especially gun season, through the end of January, and Alabama guys going to February 10th. You still can pick up one of these Southern Outdoorsmen Blaze Orange hats when they come back in stock, hopefully the next couple weeks.
Probably about a week and a half. 2
Okay,
weeks.
awesome. Well, when they come back in stock, feel free to pick one up. And we've had some great listener success stories come in with guys who've actually bought those hats. I'm calling them the lucky hat. Those
Yep.
Blaze Orange hats are the lucky hats. A lot of
Come
people
packaged with some luck.
Yeah, a lot of those people, a lot of the listeners, a lot of you guys out there that have bought those orange hats are killing the crap out of some bucks right now.
Yeah.
So you might want to pick one of those hats up. Might change your season a little bit. I don't know. Something might click for you when you put it on. But just again, appreciate the support. Appreciate everybody buying all the hats and everything. It's cool kind of seeing all those responses coming in with listener success stories with the hats. And appreciate y'all listening to the podcast. Appreciate y'all watching the podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.